So I'm not David Letterman, but Jen, how come you are so passionate about impact investing?
Yeah, I mean, somebody actually asked me this earlier, and I was like, should I share this now? I think it really comes down to three things, and it's really purpose. I spent my 20s chasing money, titles, and working on Wall Street to realize that that wasn't going to be enough, that our systems were broken. I actually want to ask Lucy where the financial services system fits in her four boxes. It's either under norm or government. And had an epiphany when I was at the lowest point in my life, struggling with major depression, 28 years old. And my way back to this place was working with homeless people. I would spend my days managing billions of dollars, and I would spend my evenings working with women who had been abused, riding the bus all night long so they wouldn't get raped, and trying to figure out why the systems don't work for all 7.8 billion people. I then went to Nicaragua and Haiti in 2011, pulled children from garbage dumps, saw poverty that I had never seen before, even though I'd worked very closely on Skid Row in Los Angeles, the homeless capital of the United States. And finally, when I went to Africa in 2013, I said there has to be a different way. I then convinced clients that had more than they were ever going to spend in a lifetime, who hated being philanthropists, who were really good business people, to take on a different narrative. We're not going to get it done with $410 billion. We have a shot at getting it done with $118 trillion in the global capital markets. So really it comes down to having systems work both socially and environmentally, and that companies need to drive more than just the profits. More than 80% of consumers say that a company's responsibility is triple, if not quadruple, bottom line. People, the planet, and profits. And some people argue with me that animals should be included in there. So that's why I've seen a theme today. There's been at least 5 people that said they quit their job in a traditional industry because they had had enough to go transform a system that doesn't work.
So, in your perspective, what is the misperceptions or myths that prevent even more people from going into impact investing? Because I think lots of people feel that you are doing a great thing, but there is some hesitance there. From your perspective, what's the boundaries?
Yeah, I think there's really 5 myths, but I'm only going to touch on 3 that I think are really the barriers. One is people perceive they have to sacrifice return. That in order to invest with a E, S, or G, environmental, social, or governance lens, you must sacrifice a return. I actually focus that not on us in this room, but that's what holds pension funds back. They manage our retirement accounts. That's what holds everyday people not being able to essentially invest. I'll dispel that maybe later on in the session, in the interview. 2, we play a game of I'm going to make a lot of money and then I'm going to give it away. It is a white, male, dominant game. It's broken. Let me spend the first 2/3 of my life amassing more wealth than I ever need, and then let me try to fix it in the last third of my life. Many prominent families taking that on. Third is that philanthropy and investing should be kept separate. We spend 5%, at least in the US, granting towards our mission because we're required to do so. And we spend 95% of our assets that actually contradict our mission, oftentimes. When what we're actually doing is we're dealing with infrastructure issues. 2.2 billion people don't have access to sanitation. 793 million people don't have access to water. The systems are broken. Those are investments. Those are infrastructure plays. We need to use all types of capital. We need grassroots organizations to seed that. Then we need to move through the capital system in order to solve it. So I'm going to turn the question on you and ask you, some would argue impact investing has been around for many decades. The Quakers invested this way, right? There's many ways of doing impact investing, from ESG divestment and investment to advocacy work with corporations. When you and I were prepping for this, you're like, this is how I've always been doing it. So combine the passion personally and professionally. Why now? And why is this so important to you?
Well, of course, impact investing, my impact investing is something different than yours and everybody else's here. There's not really a definition here, but to me, we saw before that sort of 1 million species is sort of in danger since 1970. We have climate change that we argue whether 1.5% or 2% or 2 degrees will sort of potentially destroy humankind. And you just sort of ask yourself, so what are we doing about it? And I don't want to end up in a situation when I talk to my children that currently is 9, 7, and 5 in 20 years' time, and they ask me, Dad, did you know about this? And what did you do about it? And I think we all know we're over-consuming the planet, and we can't go on this way. And we're doing some things. We're recycling. Of the population here in Sweden, 80% are recycling. We're going there with our plastics. We eat less red meat, perhaps only once a week. We take the train instead of the car. We have public transportation. Perhaps we skip one air trip a year to do better climate. But from my perspective, being an investor, you probably do all those things. But do you invest your pension money sustainably? I would argue that most of you don't. I won't ask you how many do, but have you dedicated your pension money to actually doing only investments that do good for humankind or the planet? Less than 10% do. And the impact of that is 25 times on the climate, all the other things combined that you're doing. It's great that you skip a straw at Starbucks or McDonald's, but how much do you spend on straws on a year? And you compare that to your investing. I've been with EQT, and EQT, they've raised 50 billion euro, which means that the investment capacity is more than 100 billion euro. Think about that for a second. 100 billion euro. It's one private equity firm. The Wallenberg Foundations in Sweden, which is the second largest contributor to charity in Europe, is donating 250 million a year. It's great. It's fabulous, fantastic. They do enormous good work. Vinnova, I met Vinnova here, that are of course helping sustainable businesses from the Swedish government. It's about 300 million a year in budget. There is no way we're going to solve this issue for the planet unless private capital directs itself to impact. So therefore I decided to start a company that only will invest in companies that contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it sounds ridiculous in the sense that I'm one man and one mission, but I think it can change the world. Because I think all of you should ask yourself, how is my pension money doing the world a better place to live in? Because it's millions. And probably you don't know how it's managed. It's probably in some index funds somewhere, with a lot of oil and tobacco and betting and gaming and SMS loans, and you're not sympathizing with it. It's just that it's so far away. So I want to be a wake-up call for the entire investment community. Provide an option where you can get the same kind of returns, listing in companies with social impact. And it won't cost you anything, and you've contributed a better world. This is my dream. But I think it can be conceived, and frankly, I think that people that are 25 today, they will require it. I am often at universities teaching and sitting in juries for different kind of business cases, and the passion they show in these matters never go away. They won't work for companies that don't address this issue, and they will not consume. So you may think that this will cost something. It won't. Because if you're a diesel company or if you're a fossil fuel car manufacturer, I mean, there may be some car directors in here, it's game over. There's no way with a new regulation coming, 2021, where you need to cut emissions with 30%, 2026, you're going to cut it another half. Volvo would have to spend 10,000 euro in new diesel technology into each car to actually make that transfer. They won't. It will be electricity. The hope with this as a business person is that this is a tremendous business opportunity. Volkswagen alone is spending 30 billion euro developing electricity cars. Individuals there believe that 50% of all cars 2025 in Stockholm will be electricity cars. It's 2% now. I happen to have one. I can barely charge it today. Who is going to provide the infrastructure network for those 50% of the cars? Somebody will make money on that.
Yeah.
And I am, of course, I'm a capitalist, so I'm little bit different than a lot of people are dressing with doing good, because they often come with a more liberal perspective than I do. I think this is a necessity for the planet. I think it's an opportunity to make money. We just have to make people aware of the options and provide a solution where they can do their part. And then I don't mean the straws at McDonald's. That's great, as well as the charity, but the private capital has to be moving in a different direction. So this is why I'm doing that. I'm think reasonably suitable, because I've spent the last 25 years managing money, producing very good returns. I think I have some credibility going to people, because one of the problems with impact investing is that traditionally for the very conservative financial industry, if you go to them and tell them you're an impact investor, they think you are some kind of leftist liberal that's going to lose it all away for idealist purposes. It's a complete misconception. And virtually, if you are a conservative guy that believes in market economy, and at the same time you want to save the planet and do the good thing, there is virtually no options out there. And I don't think I'm alone. And in the 25-year-olds, I'm sure that it's virtually almost all. So I think our mindset needs to change completely.
Yeah, I mean,
a long answer, I apologize.
No, I would add to that we actually have to ask our advisors, our money managers, our bankers, where our money is invested. How many of you in the room think you're currently an impact investor? Okay, newsflash. You're all an impact investor. Every investment you have has impact. Where you bank matters. They loan the money out to things that may contradict your values. You're already an impact investor. And we both agree that in 10 years, this is not going to be the conversation we're having. This is going to be how we invest. We're going to break down the normal system. Second news flash. Europe's a little different, which is why you have a US perspective and a European perspective, because we have different regulation. The market is manipulated. The government is able to do that. That's why I said it falls somewhere between norm and government. None of the fundamentals. We can talk about this all day long. So where the conversation meets with philanthropy is that we need all types of capital. So we need Jan to go work with the pension funds and move into a strategy that isn't so radically different. And then we need philanthropists, private investors, owners of companies to also move in the same, with the momentum. Because until we use a blended capital structure, we're not going to get there. They don't get to be companies that Jan wants to invest in without having seed capital from someone who's willing to take that risk. Foundations should take that early stage risk, should invest in women. We said it earlier today. Less than 3% of all venture capital goes to women. It doesn't even show up on the radar for minorities. Yet, they're the majority population in 2020. That's next year. If we're going to build an inclusive economy that works for all 7.8 billion people, we have to have early stage investments over here, philanthropy, activism, marches, our values, so that Jan can actually go deploy it at mass levels with the people that control our pension funds.
Well, I think it was asked earlier on, what can men do for gender equality and to actually help women? And to me, as a businessman, the answer is very obvious. If you think about it, the vast majority of all purchasing decisions are already taken by women. Because they spend lots of money in health in the family, they do a lot of consumption and the consumption decisions, and of course, husbands typically, they believe they rule the household, but that's not true. So I think that as a business opportunity, you just have to go there. And I do believe that even in my lifetime, I'll probably see women have a higher salaries than men, because they're way better at educating. They're way better at working in the new economy. It's no longer about muscles, it's about communication, creativity. Women are just better at it. It will be difficult for young guys to compete with the young women of today. Corporates, you just have to invest into women, but you just have to look at the market. There is nothing that you need to do. Women, in my mind, they don't really need help. You just have to give them a fair chance and see what they already represent. It's so obvious. So I must say I'm very much an optimist, because I do believe the creativity of mankind will be so huge. So when people, I think you feel it in your gut. Think about it. 1 million species, 60% of the species are gone since 1970. We can't go on this way. 75% of the land is massively changed in its nature since 1970. I mean, it's obvious that, I have some sustainability expert that tells me I can't recommend my children getting children. I refuse to take that perspective. And I actually think that if we deploy the capital there is, because there is an enormous amount of capital, it's not a huge deployment to actually solve the problem. But if we continue going on the way we do right now, it can be too late. So I think it's just a matter of waking up. And I know the financial industry, and therefore I think that we can change that altogether. Because you can just go back to your banker and say, what are you doing with my capital? Is it making the world a better place? And that will automatically change things. Because the capital is so huge.
And if they say that they don't know, you should fire them on the spot, because they know. They have the systems, they have the data. It's public for the most part. So anyone that says, I don't know what I own, I don't know what you own, they just don't want to go under the hood and actually tell you what you own. So I think sometimes when we have this conversation on that, people want an example of a company. So can you give an example of a company that you would invest in or have invested in? Probably better to use something you've done. And look at it from the financial and the impact perspective.
Well, I think that if you're going to go to people managing pensions like I do, you got to have a pretty broad perspective of what can you invest in. I personally don't believe in, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, environmental movement. They're basically telling me that, listen, you should skip anything but clean tech, because it's such a severe issue, so it can be sort of extinction of humankind. Unfortunately, I don't think that doesn't work as an investment strategy. You got to have a broad investment strategy, i.e. making people's daily life better. So you have got to have a better education, particularly for children that has, the odds against them. You got to do healthcare investing, of course. Of course, the real cynics are saying that if you create healthcare and save too many lives, climate is actually getting better. It's better they pass away, because the planet can't cater for all these people. So it's an interesting debate, but I don't think you can't have that perspective, and therefore you have to have it abroad. But I do think that energy, saving energy, and having resource efficiency will be absolutely key. And I think that things can change pretty swiftly there. The fourth of all the emissions come from actually material. So choosing the right kind of material, choosing energy, I think that internet is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. There are, of course, threats, as we've heard, to security, people knowing everything we do, but also the ability, the infrastructure we have built, and the things that can change the world. If we utilize it right, it's a tremendous tool. I have a 10-year-old son. I'm sure many of you have small children too. You're probably familiar with Fortnite. My 10-year-old loves to do Fortnite. Company launched in July 2017. 25th of July 2017. 2018, they made $2.5 billion. That number will be much bigger this year. There is barely a 10-year-old in entire Stockholm that don't know what Fortnite is.
The entire world.
Yeah. Think about the opportunity. If we use our creativity to do good things, we can change things so rapidly. EQT invested into a gaming company, 18 young guys in the basement, and within 2 years, with no marketing spend, they make 25 million a year. But of course, they produce a game where they just kill each other in some other more sophisticated way. So I think we need to change the perspective of what do we offer. But the opportunity is just amazing. It's fantastic. And I think that we underestimate the opportunity of that investment in infrastructure if we utilize it in the right way. There will be massive challenges because diesel, as I said, it's game over. That means over the next 10 years, 1 million workers will lose their job. You can think about being in the management team of Volvo these days that has tens of thousands of engineers that built their entire career on diesel and fossil engines. How keen do you think they are on that change? This will be a tremendous challenge for the political system. And we need to step up to that challenge and tell people there are opportunities, there are positives. Because let's not kid ourselves, there will be a lot of challenges. But I have to believe the world will be a better place, as it virtually always have been. And I think we have tremendous opportunity, but we got to show a direction. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of trust in our politicians. I don't think Mr. Trump, China, Putin, Brussels will solve these issues for us. It has to be us as consumers. Yeah. It has to be consumer-led. You have to do your part. You have to go to people and say, listen, I won't stand for this any longer. I want my stuff doing better things. And that's the only way we can do it. It won't be the regulators. If we push them, the politicians will give us support. The regulators will drive the effect. They won't go forward. And we have seen technology. These guys, they always produce before the legislators are there. It will continue because it's so rapid. And therefore, we have to work on an individual basis as consumers because you can just change your mind. Walk into your bank tomorrow and say, I want a sustainable product. I don't want oil. I don't want tobacco. I don't want cannabis. I don't want betting. I know you can make money on it. I know it's in index. I don't think it creates a better society. If you do that, you'll be part of changing the world. I just think that this is things we don't reflect upon, but given how the world is actually developing on the climate, you don't have to go to much data to see there's a real problem. That may be some of you think here that sort of, you don't probably know, I have no clue, how bad is it? Some people say it's already too late, some people say we have 2 years, some people say we have 20, some people say this has always been the case, so it's nothing to worry about, just keep going guys. But you know, if you do investing like I do, you look at two things, you look at probability and you look at consequence. It may be that it's very unlikely that will be extinction of humankind. But sort of 8 million dead is a pretty bad outcome. That's pretty much the concept of bankruptcy in my mind. And you never take that risk. You never write an unlimited guarantee without knowing the consequences. You never sign a naked option without a cover of your loss. But that's what we're currently doing. So why are we debating whether it's 1.5% or 2% or 10 years or 20? Just eliminate it. Why don't we address the issue? There can come nothing negative out of it. And I just think it's too little debate about it. And this is, to me, impact investing. It has to be an intent in every single investment to make the world a better place. Then it will be difficult to measure it.
Yeah.
It will be difficult to compare it. Some people will disagree when I do things that are not clean tech. They think you should do clean tech instead. I'm going to get criticized. I am a white male that is sort of part of a broken system. And of course, some people will say, listen, you're not even 1%, you are the 0.1%, so just go away. So there will be credibility issues here. But the fact that you're going to get criticized doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything. Doing something is always better than not doing anything. So I just urge you that that's great if you continue to do recycling, eat less red meat. It's also good for you, not only for the animals. And do the train, but put more burden on the financial system too.
Yeah. I would just add one more thing before we open it up for questions from you all. You can align your values today more than ever. But first you have to figure out what your why is. Nadine started with it in the morning. If you could only move the needle on one thing globally, what would that be and why? And if collectively we all did that together on the one thing that each gets us out of bed in the morning, we would start moving mountains. We would start changing systems. Figure out that for yourself. And then the what and how becomes much easier. You then have a voice. You're now an activist. You can march. You can raise your voice if you own $2,000 of a stock and change corporate behavior. Or you can tweet or put it on Facebook and then have your friends join you in that. But because of where we are today with data, technology, and that we're so connected, we have great responsibility to shift the system so that it works for all 7.8 billion, not 1% of the 7.8 billion, and that it doesn't sacrifice the environment, that we actually factor in what we're doing to the planet. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. I'll start with Phil. You're gonna have to be loud, and then we'll come to this gentleman right here. I think it's Sean, actually, with the phone. I also teach a lot, and I like to know the students' names.
The trusting guy.
That's okay. You can go first, Sean, and then Phil will go.
You had mentioned firing your asset manager if they didn't know how to do responsible and or impact investments. We don't have the luxury here of having really many very informed family offices or multifamily offices yet. So what we did, when my wife and I were looking to move our portfolio into impact investments, actually held the hand of our asset manager. Which is great. And now, several years later, the first microfinance fund they invested in, they're like, oh, it's actually still returning, still providing positive returns when equities are not. So they're actually grateful for it. It's been really slow, but I think us, especially in this market still, where there are not many impact managers, or any, really, need to be educators as well for those who are managing our money.
Absolutely. So when I say that, I meant it's a little tongue-in-cheek, because I run a firm that actually works with clients and their advisors to uncover what you're saying. Because we do need to educate the advisors, but the advisors also have to acknowledge, they have to listen to what you're asking for, rather than say, I don't know how to do that. Yeah.
But I think there is actually a recognition already in the financial system that this product is needed. I actually went to Nordea beginning of January this year and told them, listen, your brand sucks. And your younger customers will not accept this any longer. So you've got to provide an option for them where they can actually dedicate their capital to sustainable investing and only do investment that contribute to the UN development goals. And they immediately said that, listen, 300 million. There was one institution that said that, and they believe, of course, that their client will actually want this, but there isn't many people. You're right. There isn't many people that have offered this, that also from the investment expertise area, they haven't really been there. But if there are people in demand for the product, some of the people that are good professional investors will also change path, because it's very obvious that I see a lot of people that are prepared to work for me for much, much lower compensation than they do under the big investment banks. Now, I don't believe that they should be paid much less. I believe they should be paid somewhat less, because I will have to have way more sustainability analysis than any other manager do out there to secure that I'm doing good things, because it's sometimes very complex to measure and report these things. So therefore, you have to have a better measurement, insight, and reporting than other people. It means that the investment people will have to be paid a little bit less, at least for a while. But there will be lots of people doing that. So what I'm worried about is on sort of the philanthropic efforts and people sort of donating money. It's great that they do it, but I don't really think it's sustainable, because if I can prove that you give the same kind of returns and do good things, I'm going to get 30 followers. And then this is going to be a massive trend. And in 20 years, we have changed the world. Because it will no longer be acceptable not to do good with your money. And I think people will be forced to go there if just a few lead the path. It's just that very few have dared to do it yet, because they don't leave the established Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or Blackstone to do these kind of things. But if we get more people to do it, we will truly have changed the world. And I think we can do it together much, much quicker than what politicians can sort out this issue. So I wouldn't gamble with the future of my children. Trill Impact, my eldest son, is actually named Trill. And I think that since I'm going to save the future generations, I hope it's a suitable name for it. But I think we should think about the next generations. I think we even if our children make it, we don't have a right to destroy the planet for 2 generations down the road either.
Phil.
I guess this is more of a comment. So me and a few of my close friends, I think on average, we've raised about $200 to $300 million for our venture so far. I don't think any of us had received any impact investing for our work. And I would say it's almost like whenever I've had a conversation with an impact investor, I have to do all these extra things. It's almost like a different skill set to tell that story, the impact story, beyond the financial fundamentals and what we think are the core KPIs that we can actually deliver. And I guess, just as a comment, I think to make impact investing something more mainstream, it must be competitive to the other, like a financing that's available out there, at least equally, if not superior to that. And I don't know if I can't think off the top of my head right now where, from the perspective of an entrepreneur, that having that impact association is a value add, per se. I feel like right now, the thought of me having to have that extra burden of proving my impact is very, it dissuades me from taking that money. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
I understand what you're saying in a sense, because I made the agreement with Nordea that, of course, we are fortunate up here that on ESG reporting and thinking, the Nordic region is actually doing pretty well. So out of the 20 best % in the world, 80% of our companies up here already manage it. So in that sense, we have a lot of sustainability expertise. So I will utilize Nordea, which has been rated for best ESG process for investing the last 5 years. Those 35 people that work there, I buy that service from them. And they have 6 people thinking about what does the world need 2040 or 2050, and how dangerous are we? We don't know, but they have that perspective. They have ecobiologists. I'm a businessman myself. I don't really know the depth of where we're going. I don't know the competitiveness of different alternative sources. They do. And I buy that service. And I think that from their perspective, it will increase the value of their brand so much, and they can distribute the product. I think you can get a good price for it. But I agree with you. If you want to do this seriously, and I want to be world class, I want to be a world leading firm, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. And there you got to have a competitive advantage. And I believe that putting more resources into the area is one. But initially, as I said, you will have more money for the investment professionals. So you will have to have some passionate people that will sort of take a pay cut to a certain extent to do it when you start the business.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, Phil, that we have to do a better job of aligning the investor with the investee, and saying, here, we're actually talking the same language, right? It's just people are focused on different things. So I often work with multi-generational families. Generation 1 or 2, the generation that made the money, they're all for the economics and the financing. Generation 3 and 4 may want to look at your impact and your sustainability and, you know, what are you doing from the impact perspective? What are you measuring? And I think we need more intermediaries that bridge those two worlds so that you as the investee can actually go do what you're doing in the world. And we leave it up to the intermediaries who are placing capital to sort out the minutia, to find the definitions and to find the impact, right? And far too often today, we're measuring outcomes and outputs and activities. We're not actually measuring outcomes. We need to be measuring outcomes. Outputs and activities lead to outcomes. Because this happened, now this has happened. This is saying the evidence is that we're on a better path forward. I think we might have time for one more question. We do, we have 2 minutes. Hopefully it's a quick one. Does anyone have a burning question?
They're bored with us. I told you, we're not Letterman.
Well, I always like to...
Thank you. My name is Farooq from Acumen. You know, the focus on impact investing so far is generally on listed companies, whereas a lot of work that's happening in impact investing, particularly in terms of poverty alleviation, is all in the private space. How do you see that bridge happening?
I agree. I'm a private equity guy, so I'm typically working with private companies. And of course, one of the problems with doing sustainability in the listed environment, you don't really control the companies. So of course, you can measure a few things, but then the management teams can do whatever they do anyway. So it may not have been the intent you actually wanted. While when I actually stand in front of the investors and say, listen, I have control of this company, so I will have an intent and I will have an impact and I will be transparent, I will report it, everything will be completely transparent. It may be that some social impact goals fail, as well as I can lose money on the financial impact, but I will at least give it an honest try. And of course I do think private companies suit themselves better because there you can really have an intake and you can have control. So it's much better and much more effective than on the listed community. But if you can't find private funds doing it, because it's very rare, I think this effort is sort of one of the novelties, so there is not many out there. TPG Rise is doing it in the US. Generation with Al Gore has tried both on the public space and the private space. There are a few, but it's sort of negligible in the grand scheme of things. So we got to move the private investment climate and perspective completely. But I do think that it's easier on the private company because there you can really have the owners accountable for also delivering social impact as well as financial return.
Yeah, I would just add that foundations and family offices and individuals absolutely need to move in the private sector. I mean, 80% of our work is in the private markets. It's early stage stuff that's not going to get to scale. We're not going to get to a listed company if we never invested at the seed level. And so a lot of the poverty alleviation across, India and Africa, it starts with big bets that, as you and I both know, take 10 to 15 years to pay off before they're going to get into mainstream private equity. And we need to use a blended capital structure, and each of us need to play where our risk tolerance is and the capital we have to be able to accomplish the whole spectrum. So I always like to end with a call to action, because otherwise I think it's just a lot of talk. So I ask you each to consider that you're already an impact investor and to look at one company or your portfolio and actually know what you own and make one change that aligns with your values and what you care about, so that together we may move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Jan.